Ryan Mitchell stood at the edge of financial collapse, a 32-year-old father navigating life alone. His pockets empty, but his heart still capable of warmth. Kindness remained the only currency he possessed in abundance. The man who received this quiet generosity was Edwin Hartwell, a peculiar elderly figure whose daily presence felt more like a shadow than a person. He arrived at Ryan's modest coffee house each dawn without fail, claiming the same weathered seat tucked beside the frosted window pane. Morning after morning, Ryan acknowledged him with genuine friendliness. Steaming coffee appeared before Edwin without request. Brief conversations unfolded naturally. Ryan expected nothing beyond the simple exchange. He believed these small gestures made existence slightly more bearable for everyone involved, especially during those bleak mornings when gray clouds seemed to press down on the entire neighborhood. What Ryan couldn't possibly grasp was the staggering secret this frail visitor concealed. Edwin possessed wealth measuring in the billions, a fortune so vast it defied comprehension. This revelation would soon detonate through Ryan's world like dynamite. One stormy Tuesday, the coffeehouse door refused to swing open for Edwin, as usual. Instead, it admitted his legal representatives flanked by 4 imposing security personnel dressed in matching dark suits. Their expressions carved from granite, they had come specifically for Ryan. This true account follows a man stripped of nearly everything except his capacity for compassion. It also chronicles a solitary billionaire who discovered family where logic suggested he never would. If you trust that minor gestures possess transformative power, subscribe now and activate notifications. Each week brings another narrative demonstrating how unremarkable moments can renew our faith in humanity's goodness. Consider what might unfold when a struggling father's identity surfaces in the last will of a billionaire stranger. Let's discover this together. The brass bell mounted above the entrance to Riverside Coffee Company provided the constant soundtrack accompanying Ryan Mitchell's existence. Not a cheerful musical note, but rather a tired metallic announcement signaling yet another patron requiring service, another dish needing removal, another fragile hope that perhaps the tip container might hold slightly more coins by closing time. The establishment itself existed as a relic frozen between forgotten eras, featuring worn butter-yellow vinyl seating, linoleum flooring that seemed to grip shoe soles. The mingled aromas of scorched coffee beans and bacon grease had seeped into every crevice of the walls. For Ryan, or rather for the young man colleagues still remembered from his culinary academy days, Riverside Coffee Company functioned simultaneously as confinement and sanctuary. 3 years had passed since he began working 6 consecutive days weekly, arriving at 5:30 each morning and departing at 2 each afternoon. He executed the well-practiced choreography of waiting tables, gliding through cramped aisles with natural elegance, plates balanced expertly along his forearm, coffee poured without spillage. Smiles offered so frequently, he sometimes questioned their authenticity. His genuine passion, however, remained imprisoned within a cramped apartment several blocks distant, buried beneath accumulated dust and overdue financial statements. He had once envisioned a restaurant bearing his own name, where culinary artistry became a dialect and dishes evoked childhood memories. That ambition had transformed into an unaffordable luxury, now suffocated beneath mountains of obligations, outstanding debts, sleepless nights devoted to raising his young son without assistance. Understanding Ryan's current circumstances requires rewinding time slightly. Ryan entered the world within a blue-collar immigrant household. His father, Carlos Mitchell, had emigrated from Puerto Rico, working as an electrician. His mother, Ellen O'Brien, descended from Irish-American heritage, serving as a registered nurse. They encountered each other at a Queens medical facility between overnight shifts during a thunderstorm. Love blossomed quickly. Ryan arrived as their sole offspring. His childhood unfolded between dual cultural worlds. Spanish and English phrases filled their home interchangeably. The fragrances of traditional sofrito mingled with fresh soda bread throughout their cramped kitchen. His parents labored relentlessly, providing their child improved opportunities. For a period, this aspiration seemed attainable. Ryan enrolled in culinary training. His innate talent for combining flavors captured the attention of experienced chefs. The future appeared limitless before him. Then Amanda Sanchez entered his world. They fell deeply in love and married, perhaps too hastily. When Amanda conceived, Ryan believed he possessed everything necessary: a promising career, a growing family, contentment itself. But existence always had alternative plans. His father Carlos perished in a workplace incident when Ryan reached 25. 2 years following that tragedy, his mother Ellen succumbed to her battle with cancer. Then, after their son Marcus was born, Amanda realized this life didn't align with her expectations. She couldn't endure the exhausting nights, the confined living quarters, the financial pressure of child-rearing. One morning, when Marcus had just turned 2, Ryan awakened to discover a handwritten message resting on their kitchen counter. The words read, "I'm sorry, I cannot continue this way. I need a different existence. You're a good father. Marcus will thrive with you, Amanda." Just like that, Ryan became a solo parent. He needed to abandon his position at the upscale restaurant. The unpredictable hours made stability impossible. He required something dependable. A schedule allowing him to collect his son from school daily. That's when Riverside Coffee Company appeared. Morning shift beginning at 5:30, concluding at 2. This meant he could retrieve Marcus by 3, spending afternoons together. It also meant waking at 4:15 every morning, existing in perpetual exhaustion, shelving his restaurant dream permanently. But Ryan never voiced complaints, because each evening when he turned the key and Marcus came sprinting forward, shouting "Daddy" and wrapping small arms around him as though the universe contained only them, every ounce of weariness dissolved instantly. Marcus, now 6 years old, possessing curly dark hair and wide brown eyes, represented his entire world. The boy provided the reason Ryan rose each morning, the smile sustaining him through endless weary days. But survival remained extraordinarily difficult. Monthly rent for their small Lower East Side apartment consumed $1,800. After-school childcare required $800. Marcus's asthma medication cost $120. Insurance covered only partial amounts. Ryan's total income from the coffee house, including gratuities, reached approximately $2,400. The mathematics told a harsh story: 2,400 minus 2,720. He fell short $320 monthly. This calculation excluded food, clothing, transportation. Ryan was drowning, and he knew it. Credit card debt had climbed to $8,200. The landlord had delivered 3 written warnings regarding overdue rent. He existed balanced precariously between survival and homelessness. But Ryan ensured Marcus never witnessed the worry. Each morning, he woke at 4:15, careful not to disturb his sleeping child. He prepared breakfast, leaving it arranged on the table with a small note: "Dad loves you. Remember your inhaler." Miss Jamie, the compassionate neighbor, arrived at 7 to escort Marcus to school. Ryan boarded the subway in darkness, usually sleeping 20 minutes on the rigid plastic seat before entering the coffee house at 5. Tony Ramirez, the 62-year-old proprietor with a perpetually stained apron, would scowl at him. "You're 2 minutes late, Ryan. Sorry, the train experienced delays." Rachel Morgan, the veteran server, aged 54, would shake her head. "That single dad's always dragging. Bet the kid was sick again last night." Ryan heard these remarks, but never responded. He simply fastened his apron, brewed the coffee, commenced another day identical to all others. The regular customers resembled recurring characters in a theatrical production. Dennis, the construction supervisor, invariably left exactly $1 as gratuity, regardless of the bill total. The two administrative assistants from the adjacent law firm spent every morning discussing their supervisors' romantic entanglements. And then there was Edwin. He wasn't merely a regular patron. He had become part of the establishment itself, like the flickering neon sign outside. Every morning at precisely 7:15, he pushed open the heavy glass door and shuffled slowly toward the corner table beside the window. He never acknowledged anyone, always wore identical clothing. A faded tweed jacket, threadbare trousers, cracked leather shoes. His face resembled a map of wrinkles. His pale blue eyes clouded and remote, gazing through objects without truly observing them. Asterisk, he was a whisper within a noisy room. The first day he entered, Tony warned Ryan, "Don't waste effort on the old man in the corner. He doesn't speak to anyone. Just provide him black coffee and the special. He'll pay exact change and leave." Rachel scoffed. Waste of a 4-person table. Should make him sit at the counter. But Ryan perceived something different in that lonely, weathered figure. He recognized something familiar. A dignified form of solitude that stirred the artist still living quietly inside him, so he disregarded their advice. On that first day, he placed a menu before the man. "Good morning, sir." "I'm Ryan. Can I start you with some coffee?" The old man simply grunted without raising his eyes. Ryan poured the coffee anyway. The following day he repeated this, and the next. For 7 consecutive days the man responded to every greeting with silence. But Ryan persisted. "The toast looks particularly good today. Or it's freezing out there. This coffee should warm you right up." Then one Monday morning, approximately a month later, when Ryan delivered the food over, he noticed the man struggling to cut his toast with a dull diner knife. His knuckles were swollen from arthritis. Without hesitation, Ryan gently took the knife from his hand. "Let me help you with that," he said softly. He cut the toast into 4 small squares, bite-sized portions. For the first time, Edwin looked up. His cloudy blue eyes met Ryan's, and for a fleeting second, Ryan saw a spark. Perhaps surprise, perhaps gratitude. The man gave a small nod, then lowered his head again. That was a victory. From that day forward, they had a quiet ritual. Ryan brought black coffee, the daily special, and always cut the toast. Sometimes he shared small stories. A humorous customer or a dream of a restaurant that blended the flavors of his father's Puerto Rico and his mother's Ireland. The man never replied, but Ryan could feel him listening. Sometimes Edwin left an extra quarter on the table. A silent acknowledgement that to Ryan meant more than a $20 bill. His coworkers teased him endlessly. "Still flirting with your corner boyfriend, Ryan." Rachel smirked. "Leave the old man alone." Tony grumbled. "As long as he doesn't complain, it's fine." Ryan didn't care. Those 10 minutes each morning had become an anchor in his chaotic life. In a world that demanded too much and gave too little, that fragile connection felt pure. He wasn't doing it for tips or thanks. He did it because when he saw that lonely man at the corner table, he knew everyone deserves a bit of warmth, even if they never ask for it. He had no idea that his small act of kindness was being observed, recorded, and judged by a mind sharper than anyone in that coffee house could imagine. Weeks passed and the quiet ritual continued. Every morning, at exactly 7:15, the door opened and Edwin walked in, and every morning Ryan was ready. Piping hot black coffee, the daily breakfast special, and his steady hands cutting the toast into 4 perfect squares. But then something began to change. By the 6th week, as Ryan refilled his cup, Edwin spoke. His voice was hoarse, faint as if it hadn't been used in years. "You have a child." Ryan froze. It was the first time the old man had spoken to him beyond a nod of thanks. "Yes," Ryan smiled, his face lighting up. "A son 6 years old. His name's Marcus." Edwin nodded slowly. Why are you working so early? Who watches him? Ryan told him about waking up at 4:15, about preparing breakfast the night before, about the kind neighbor who got Marcus ready and took him to school. Edwin listened, his pale blue eyes unblinking. That's hard, he finally said. Ryan shrugged. It's okay. I'm his dad. I do what I have to do. Edwin looked at him for a long time, a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled slightly. You're a good father. Those 4 words made Ryan fight back tears for the rest of his shift, because no one had ever said that to him. Not Amanda, not Tony, no one. But this old man, a stranger, saw him, truly saw him. From that day on, Edwin began to ask about Marcus. What grade is he in? What does he like? Do you read to him? And Ryan answered, his face brightening every time he mentioned his son. Marcus loves to draw dragons and superheroes. I keep every picture. He wants to be a chef like his dad. I tell him he can be anything he wants. Edwin listened, and sometimes, very rarely, a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. One Saturday morning in the 8th week, everything changed. Ryan got a call from Miss Jamie, the neighbor. Ryan, I'm so sorry. I can't watch Marcus today. My daughter's sick. Ryan's heart sank. He had to work. He couldn't miss his shift. Tony had already warned him more than once. With no other choice, he brought Marcus to the coffee house. Daddy has to work, buddy, he said as they rode the subway. You'll sit quietly and do your homework. Okay. Marcus, wearing his Spider-Man backpack, nodded eagerly. Yes, Dad. I'll be good. As soon as they walked in, Tony looked up from behind the counter, frowning. Ryan, why is your kid here? I'm sorry, Tony. The sitter canceled last minute. I had no choice. He'll sit quietly in the corner, I promise. Tony sighed. Fine. Just don't lose customers. Ryan led Marcus to a small table near the kitchen, where the boy could see him. Sit here and color, okay? I'll check on you often. Marcus opened his coloring book and box of crayons, tongue poking out as he concentrated on a page of Spider-Man. Ryan started his shift, his eyes constantly flicking toward his son. At exactly 7:15, the door opened. Edwin walked in, but this time, as he passed, he stopped. He looked at Marcus, the little boy sitting alone bent over his drawing. Ryan noticed and hurried over. I'm sorry, sir, he said quietly, embarrassed. I had to bring my son today. The sitter canceled. He won't cause any trouble. Edwin looked at Marcus, then back at Ryan. That's your son? Yes, sir. His name's Marcus. He's 6. Edwin stayed silent for a long moment. Then he said something Ryan didn't expect. Let him sit with me. Ryan froze. But you? Edwin's eyes met his. For the first time, emotion flickered clearly within those pale blue irises. Pain, longing, loneliness. I'd like to get to know him, may I? Ryan nodded, almost not believing what he'd heard. He led Marcus to the corner table. Marcus, this is Mr. Hartwell. Say hello, buddy. Marcus looked up, his big brown eyes wide. Hi, sir. I'm Marcus. Edwin slowly sat down, studying the boy with an expression Ryan couldn't quite read. What are you drawing? Marcus grinned proudly and held out the paper. I drew my dad. He's my superhero. The drawing was as clumsy as any 6-year-old's. A stick figure holding a tray of food with messy words scrawled above. My dad, my hero. Edwin held the paper, his hand trembling. Ryan noticed something strange, a tear sliding down the old man's cheek. You're very lucky, Edwin said softly, his voice shaking, to have a father like that. Marcus nodded eagerly. Yes, sir. He's the best dad in the world. A few steps away, Ryan wiped at his eyes. He had to get back to work, but he couldn't tear his gaze away from the scene. The next 2 hours were something close to a miracle. Edwin, the silent man Ryan had known for 8 weeks, came alive. He asked Marcus about school, friends, and what he wanted to be when he grew up. I want to be a chef like Dad, Marcus said proudly. Dad says I can cook anything if I try hard. Edwin smiled, truly smiled, for the first time Ryan had ever seen. Your dad's right. Do you know how to count? Yes, I can add and subtract. Let me teach you a bit of math then, if your dad agrees. Ryan, pouring coffee at another table, looked up and nodded. Of course, sir. For the next 2 hours, Ryan watched an entirely different Edwin Hartwell. He patiently explained equations to Marcus. He laughed when the boy grasped a tricky one. He praised him when he got an answer right. He was no longer a lonely old man. He was a grandfather. Around 10, Marcus started to yawn. Normally, he'd be at his Saturday class by 9, so now he was tired. He rested his head on the table and drifted off to sleep quietly. Edwin took off his tweed jacket and draped it over the boy's shoulders. Ryan came to check on them, emotion flooding his chest. "Thank you, sir," he whispered. "You don't have to." Edwin looked up, his eyes glassy. "No thank you, Ryan. You gave me an invaluable gift today." "What gift?" "The chance to be a grandfather again, even just for a few hours." Then he said something that made Ryan retreat to the back room to cry. "I once had a son and a grandson. They're both gone now. But today it felt like they were still here." By noon, Edwin was preparing to leave. Much later than his usual 8:30 departure. Marcus had woken up full of energy. "Mr. Hartwell, will you come back next week? You promised to teach me chess." Edwin knelt down, taking the boy's small hand in his. "I promise, my dear boy, I promise." As he left the coffee house, Ryan and Marcus stood by the window watching him go. "Dad," Marcus said, "he's really nice." Ryan hugged his son tightly. "Yes, buddy, he really is." Ryan had no idea that would be the last time he ever saw Edwin alive. Monday began like any other day. Ryan woke at 4. He prepared breakfast for Marcus, wrote a small note, and stuck it on the fridge. Kissed his son's forehead, then stepped outside, slipping into the freezing night. On the way to the subway, he arrived at the coffee house at 28 minutes past 5. Tony grumbled that he was 2 minutes late. Rachel shot him a displeased glance, and the shift began like always. By 7, Ryan was getting ready for the regulars. He brewed black coffee, checked the breakfast special. Eggs, bacon, whole wheat toast. Then out of habit, he cut the toast into 4 perfect squares. He set everything on the corner table where the man always sat and waited. 7:15, the door still didn't open. Ryan looked at the clock. Maybe his train was delayed. It had happened before. 7:30, still no Edwin. A thread of worry began to coil in his gut. "Tony," he called. "Do you know the address or phone number of the old man at the corner table?" Tony looked up from the griddle. "No. Why? He hasn't come. He's never late." Rachel let out a sharp little laugh with money like his. "He's probably vacationing in Florida," but Ryan didn't laugh. A strange unease was blooming inside him. 8:45, 8:30, no Edwin. Ryan poured the wrong coffee, forgot to run a ticket to the kitchen. Tony snapped. "Ryan, focus." "What are you doing?" "I'm sorry." By 9, Ryan decided. If there was still no sign, he'd find a way to contact him. Ask the regulars or someone who might know, and then the bell rang. But the sound was different from every other day. The entire coffee house fell silent. Even the sizzle from the griddle seemed to freeze. 4 men walked in, tall in black suits, moving with the crisp purpose of a movie scene, tiny earpieces in their ears. Their motions precise enough to chill the room. 2 planted themselves at the door. The other 2 stepped aside, making way for a 5th man. He was in his late 50s, silver hair slicked back, a face sharp as a blade and eyes cold. Intelligent, a charcoal suit perfectly tailored, probably worth more than Ryan's 5 years of salary. A glossy leather briefcase in his hand, he scanned the room. Somewhere between mild disdain and a fixed objective, Tony tried to regain his composure, wiping his hands on his greasy apron. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The man in charcoal didn't answer. His gaze swept once and stopped on Ryan, who stood frozen beside the espresso machine. Coffee pot hovering midair in his hand, he approached, each step heavy and exact. His Italian shoes ticked a steady rhythm across the linoleum floor. Two bodyguards followed a few paces behind, bringing with them a pressure that seemed to squeeze the oxygen from the room. "Are you Ryan Mitchell?" His voice was low, calm, carrying an authority that made people want to nod. Ryan's heart battered his ribs. He nodded, throat dry. What was happening? Was he in trouble, the rent, the credit cards? Or was something wrong with Marcus? The man stopped in front of him, studying him for a long beat. "I'm Charles Bennett, a senior partner at Harrison & Wells. I'm Mr. Edwin Hartwell's personal attorney." The name hung in the air, Edwin Hartwell. It took Ryan a few seconds to make the connection. The old man from the corner table. "Edwin," Ryan whispered. "Is he okay?" "He didn't come in this morning. I was a little worried." Mr. Bennett's face softened barely. Mr. Hartwell passed away peacefully in his sleep late Sunday night. Ryan's whole world tilted. The coffee pot in his hand suddenly weighed too much to hold. A wave of grief rose up, sudden, fierce. It made no sense. He hardly knew the man, but that quiet routine, that black coffee, that morning nod, they had become part of his life. A small anchor in a chaotic world, and now it was gone. The image of him smiling at Marcus, the look in his eyes when he said "you're very lucky," and the promise to teach chess, all of it flashed back like a film reel snapping. "Oh God," Ryan murmured. I'm so sorry to hear that." The first tear fell before he could wipe it away. Linda at the bar gaped. Dennis folded his newspaper. The whole coffee house watched, following a scene no one understood. Mr. Bennett gave a slight nod, voice even. Mr. Hartwell was a very meticulous man with very specific instructions. In his last will and final instructions, there is a provision requiring your immediate presence. If you are able, please make arrangements. A car is waiting outside to take us to the office. A will, Ryan blinked. "I think there's been a mistake. I just served him coffee. There's no mistake, Mr. Mitchell." Bennett said, firm but not unkind. "You are the person who cut his toast into 4 squares. Every morning for the past 18 months without ever needing to be asked." That detail stunned Ryan. He had noticed, not just noticed. He had told his attorney. Ryan turned to Tony, who stood rigid behind the counter. I don't know what this is." Tony only said quietly, "Don't, Ryan, just go. Rachel will cover." Rachel shot him a look, a flicker of envy in her eyes, but no words. Ryan untied his apron and set it on the counter. He grabbed his old bag from the back and stepped out. 4 bodyguards and the attorney closed ranks around him, forming a strange circle between a tiny coffee shop and a faraway world of privilege. Both staff and customers stared as if watching someone get pulled into a story that didn't belong to them. Outside, the air was cold and damp. A sleek black Lincoln Continental waited at the curb, engine purring softly. A bodyguard opened the door. As Ryan sank into the supple leather seat, the most luxurious thing he'd ever touched, he glanced back at Riverside Coffee Company, where it had all begun. It looked small and sad beneath the gray sky. A cold intuition threaded through him. He would never look at it the same way again. The morning ritual was over, and something new, complicated, profound, and impossible to predict had just begun. The trip to the law office was a silent, surreal passage across the city. Ryan stared out through the dark-tinted window. Familiar streets suddenly felt distant, separated from him by a thin veil of mist. Inside the car was a quiet oasis steeped in the smell of leather and polish. Mr. Bennett sat opposite, flipping through documents in his leather briefcase. His face was a professional mask, unreadable. In Ryan's head spun a vortex of confusion and a dull grief for the old man he had hardly truly known. Harrison and Wells occupied the top floor of a glittering skyscraper in the financial district. A world far from Riverside Coffee Company, marble floors, soaring glass walls with a panoramic view of the city, hushed corridors lined with art. Ryan, in faded jeans and worn sneakers, felt like a stray cat that had wandered into a palace. He was led into a large conference room, where a long, glossy walnut table dominated the space. At one end of the table sat two people who looked out of place here. Though for different reasons, they radiated the aura of offended privilege and impatience. The man, late 20s, hair slicked back. A designer suit a bit too tight. Eyes etched with irritation. The woman beside him, likely his mother, dressed flawlessly, her face a mask of polite disdain. 10 fingers tapping impatiently on the tabletop. Mr. Bennett cleared his throat as they entered. Miss Nicole Hartwell, Mr. Brian Hartwell. This is Mr. Ryan Mitchell. Brian's gaze slid over Ryan with open contempt. His lip curling. This is who we've been waiting for. A waiter. Grandpa must have been senile. Brian, please, the mother chided, though there was no heat in her voice. Her look towards Ryan was just as cold. Mr. Mitchell, please have a seat. Bennett indicated the chair at the opposite head of the table. Set apart from the Hartwells, the distance was intentional. A chasm between two worlds. Ryan sat down. Fingers interlaced tightly in his lap. The bodyguard stood motionless against the far wall. The air was so taut it could be cut with a knife. Now that all parties to the principal are present, we'll begin, Bennett announced, opening a thick leather-bound file. He put on reading glasses and began in an even dry tone. Most of it was legal terminology that washed over Ryan. Trusts, endowments for charities he'd never heard of. Requests of funds he couldn't picture. The numbers were so enormous, they became abstractions. No longer money. Clearly the Hartwell estate was a mountain. Then Bennett paused, looking directly at Nicole and Brian. To my daughter-in-law, Nicole Hartwell, and to my grandson, Brian Hartwell, I bequeath the contents of the Hartwell Family Trust as previously arranged. The principal amount equivalent to $5 million to each. Brian snorted loudly. $5 million. That's it? An insult. The company's worth billions. Your grandfather liquidated most of his personal holdings over the past 2 years. Bennett replied coolly. He had full rights over his assets. He owed no one anything. He owes us, Nicole snapped. The polite mask cracking. We are his family. Bennett ignored the outburst and read on. All remaining personal effects, real property, and control of Hartwell Enterprises shall be handled as follows. He drew a deep breath. Ryan held his still, not knowing why he was here. To my friend and physician, Dr. Samuel Torres, I leave $2 million. He turned a page. Ryan's eyes widened, and now Bennett looked up. Over the rim of his glasses, straight at Ryan. His voice carrying in the hushed room. We come to the final clause, he read to Mr. Ryan Mitchell, the young man at Riverside Coffee Company, who extended kindness to an old man when there was no reason to, who treated him with dignity when others saw only a nuisance, and who never forgot to cut his toast because he noticed the old man's hands trembled. Ryan's vision blurred with tears. He had noticed all of it, Bennett continued, his voice seeming to soften, to Mr. Mitchell. I leave a legacy of kindness repaid. First, a gift of $500,000 to be transferred immediately to his account to ease burdens as he once eased mine. Ryan's mouth fell open. The room tilted. $500,000. More than any number he'd ever held in his life. Enough to clear every debt, to provide for Marcus for years. A miracle, what? Brian shot to his feet, roaring. The old man's given $500,000 to some busboy. We'll sue. He wasn't of sound mind. Sit down, Mr. Hartwell. Bennett said, voice like ice. I'm not finished. Brian glared, then sank back into his chair, face flushed with rage. Bennett adjusted his glasses and read the final line. And finally, because it was the last place on earth I felt seen, not as a source of money, but as a human being, I bequeath to Mr. Ryan Mitchell the entirety of the assets and business known as Riverside Coffee Company at 428 East 14th Street, which I purchased 6 months ago through a subsidiary. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the conference room. Ryan stared. The coffee house. He had bought the coffee house for himself. Brian laughed. Not a pleasant laugh, but a cold, vicious, incredulous bark. The coffee house, you left him a grease trap. Perfect. After all those pretty words, he locked the busboy in his own cage. Grandpa had a twisted sense of humor, but Bennett did not laugh. He closed the will, removed his glasses, and looked at Ryan with an expression hard to name. Part sympathy, part respect, and part warning. There is one more thing, Mr. Mitchell. The coffee house comes with a small investment portfolio Mr. Hartwell attached to the business to secure long-term operations and renovation. That portfolio is currently valued at approximately $6 million. Brian's laughter died. The color drained from his face. From red to chalk white, Nicole's carefully manicured hand flew to cover her mouth. Ryan felt the ground drop away beneath him. $6 million. The coffee house, not a cage, a kingdom. The taciturn old man he served every morning, the man he had once pitied, wasn't just wealthy. He was Edwin Hartwell, founder of Hartwell Enterprises, a mogul hiding in plain sight. And he had just handed a one-time culinary school dropout turned waiter the keys to a new life. A life that, judging by the sparks flaring in Brian Hartwell's eyes, might become very, very dangerous. Leaving the law office was like stepping out of a decompression chamber into a storm. Bodyguards escorted Ryan to the Lincoln Continental, shielding him from Brian's frothing stream of insults as he followed them into the hallway. This isn't over, you piece of trash. My lawyers will tear this apart. You won't see a cent. Ryan didn't answer. He was still in shock, his mind replaying two phrases on a loop. $6 million. The coffee house is his. Bennett handed over a business card and a thick folder. A financial advisor will call you tomorrow, Mr. Mitchell. Do not speak to anyone, especially members of the Hartwell family. If they contact you, call me immediately. Mr. Hartwell anticipated their reaction. Inside the folder, there's an envelope. A private letter to you. Read it when you have a quiet moment. The car dropped him in front of the shabby building where he lived. The contrast numbed him. 1 minute walnut wood and billion-dollar figures. The next, a dusty, creaking staircase leading up to a small apartment. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Canvases leaned against the wall. An empty easel stood. A silent reminder of a life on hold. The first thing he did was call Marcus's after-school program. Voice trembling, he spoke with the finance manager. Paid off the entire balance due, prepaid 2 years, and requested the best program for Marcus, including the art classes he'd never been able to afford. Relief hit him like a wave so strong it drove him to his knees. He sank to the floor and wept, not from sadness but from the sudden release, crushing a burden he had carried for too long. The next morning, Ryan didn't go to the coffee house. He couldn't. What would he even say? How would he walk in there? Instead, he went to the bank with the $500,000 trust check Bennett had prepared. The bank manager, who had always been politely cool, suddenly beamed and led him to a private office with a conspicuous deference. The world around him had begun to change. By afternoon, he knew he couldn't hide forever. He had to face it. He took a deep breath and walked the familiar streets back to Riverside Coffee Company during the lunch rush. Through the glass, he saw Rachel bustling, Tony sweating over the griddle. He pushed open the door. The bell chimed. Heads turned. Conversations died. Tony looked up, spatula in hand. Rachel froze mid-step with a tray of sandwiches, They had all heard the rumor. From Dennis, who'd witnessed the morning before. Must have spread everywhere, Ryan, Tony said, his voice uncertain. I heard you came into some money. Ryan stepped up to the counter. He looked from Tony to Rachel to the kitchen staff peeking out. The people who had once been his whole world. It's true, Ryan said, his voice steady in a way that surprised him. Mr. Hartwell left me some money, and he left me the coffee house. A murmur rippled through the staff. Tony's spatula clanged onto the griddle. Left you what? I've owned this place for 30 years. Ryan's heart sank. This was the part Bennett had warned him about. He opened the folder and pulled out a document. According to this Tony, you sold the coffee house 6 months ago to Hartwell Holdings. Since then you've been a salaried manager. Tony went still. His face went ash gray. Hartwell Holdings. They paid me a fortune, more than this place was worth. I figured some developer would tear it down. I had no idea. He slumped onto a stool as if the ground had given way. So I've been working for the old man all this time, and now I work for you. The absurdity hit everyone at once. Ryan Mitchell, the quiet server whose hours had been cut, was now their boss. Rachel barked out a bitter scraping laugh. Fairy tale stuff, huh? So what now, boss? Fire everyone and hire your friends. The test hung in the air. The first trial. Every eye fixed on Ryan. He could feel the anger. The suspicion, the fear, the old life was gone. He was no longer one of them. He was the owner. The other, Ryan drew a breath. Setting aside his shock and fear, he thought of Edwin, of the man's quiet dignity. What would he want? No one's getting fired. His voice was clear and firm, even to his own surprise. Nothing changes right now, Tony. You're the best short-order cook in the city, Rachel. You can run 6 tables without breaking a sweat. This place works because of all of you. I don't know much about running a business. I'm going to need your help. That sincerity vented the pressure in the room. Tony looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Rachel still frowned, unconvinced. So what's your big plan? Champagne with caviar? No. Ryan said with a small smile. The first since yesterday. But I'm buying a new espresso machine, a knife grinder, and we're fixing that air conditioner. It was exactly the right thing to say. A couple of cooks in the back laughed. Those were the daily gripes, small stubborn miseries. Having the new owner, once their co-worker, acknowledge them meant more than they expected. At that moment the bell chimed again. A mail carrier stood in the doorway. Package for Ryan Mitchell? Ryan signed, opened it, puzzled. Inside was a slim, elegant box, stamped Harrison Wells. Resting on velvet lay an antique brass key and a handwritten letter on thick cream paper. The handwriting was shaky but clear. From Edwin. Ryan opened the letter. Hands trembling, my dear Ryan, if you're reading this, the world has learned my secret, and you have received my gift. The money is for your freedom. The coffee house is for your heart. This key is for your future. It opens my private office. Charles knows where. Go there. Understand why. One last request from an old man. Please go. Edwin. Postscript. There's a small gift for Marcus in my desk drawer. Wait until his birthday. A key. A secret office. Ryan looked up from the letter, his head spinning. This legacy wasn't just money and a building. It was a mystery. And as he took in the uncertain faces of the staff and remembered Brian Hartwell's venomous threats, Ryan understood he would have to solve it if he truly wanted to claim his new life. The address Mr. Bennett gave Ryan was on Park Avenue. One of those pre-war limestone buildings with a canopied entrance and a doorman who looked like a retired general. As the taxi pulled to the curb, a fresh wave of unease rose in him. He wore the nicest outfit he owned. A plain black shirt bought at a thrift store, and still felt like an imposter. Mr. Bennett was waiting in the lobby, solemn. He hasn't let anyone into his private apartment in over 10 years. He said, as the two of them stood in a wood-paneled elevator gliding quietly to the top floor. Not even family, he handled all business at headquarters. This was his refuge. The elevator opened directly into the apartment. Ryan stepped out and forgot to breathe. The space was vast. Walls of glass from floor to ceiling, looking straight out over Central Park. But it wasn't the view or the luxury that overwhelmed him. It was the art. Paintings covered the walls. Over the fireplace hung a Monet, water lilies shimmering in the afternoon light. A Degas dancer sculpture stood on a plinth. On the adjoining wall was a small Van Gogh self-portrait, its gaze blazing through him, a private museum with flawless taste. He was one of the most discreet art collectors in the world. Bennett murmured, watching Ryan's reaction. This is what Brian really wants. This collection. It's priceless. The apartment was perfect to the point of coldness, and loneliness seeped into every corner. No family photos, no trace of everyday clutter. Just priceless art and elegant sterile furnishings, like a gilded cage. The study is this way. Bennett led Ryan down a long hallway. He stopped at a heavy oak door. He gave me a sealed envelope with the key, instructing me to open it only after his death, to grant you access. I'll wait out here. Ryan's hand trembled slightly as he fit the antique brass key Edwin had left him into the lock. The mechanism turned with a satisfying click. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The study was nothing like the rest of the apartment. Warm, lived in. Books crammed every shelf, from classical literature to modern physics. By the fireplace sat a large, worn leather armchair. The air carried the faint scent of old paper and extinguished pipe tobacco. But what dominated the room was the wall behind the desk. Not a painting, a corkboard stretching from floor to ceiling, overlaid with a complex web of photographs, stock charts, legal documents, handwritten notes, all connected with colored string, the strategic map of a general commanding a global empire. This was the true Edwin Hartwell. At the very center of that web was something out of tune. A small, slightly blurred photograph. Ryan stepped closer. It showed a woman laughing, seated on a checkered picnic blanket in a park. She was lovely, kind eyes, a warm smile. Beside it, another photo. The same woman standing proudly in front of a small, charming shop. The sign read Margaret's Table, where everyone is family. Ryan's eyes were drawn to yellowed newspaper clippings. The headlines told a tragic story. Promising restaurateur Margaret Hartwell killed in car accident. Corporate shark Harrison Daniels snaps up bankrupt restaurant chain. Hartwell Enterprises announces hostile takeover of Daniels Industries. Everything clicked into place. Margaret must have been his wife. Someone who opened simple places where people could sit and eat together. She was gone, and a corporate predator named Daniels seemed to have profited, only to be crushed years later by Edwin's retaliation. Ryan glanced at another section of the board, the part devoted to Brian, photos of Brian on yachts, in nightclubs with a string of models, financial reports showing massive losses from a tech startup funded with his grandfather's money, copies of checks Edwin had written to cover his grandson's gambling debts. A note in Edwin's shaky hand. It carries her name, but not her heart. At last, Ryan's gaze settled on a small, empty patch of board. Pinned there was a recent photo, a distant candid of Ryan himself. He was standing outside Riverside Coffee Company on a break, smiling at something on his phone. Beside it was a handwritten scrap. He has her heart. Tears slid down Ryan's cheeks. It had never been about toast. He hadn't been testing Ryan's kindness. He'd been searching for a reflection of the wife he lost. Someone with a good heart who understood that the worth of a place isn't in its price, but in the warmth and dignity it gives. The coffee house wasn't just any diner. It reminded him of Margaret's dream. By leaving it to Ryan, Edwin wasn't merely giving a gift. He was entrusting Margaret's legacy. A new resolve hardened Ryan's grief. Now it wasn't about money. It was about honoring the faith of a lonely old man who had lost everything that truly mattered. Brian didn't just want money. He wanted to erase the last thing his grandfather had built. The only legacy Edwin believed was worthy. Ryan stepped to the desk. On it sat a sealed envelope with his name. He opened it. Inside were a letter and a share certificate, a single share of Hartwell Enterprises. The letter read, "Ryan, knowledge is power. This single share gives you the legal right to attend next month's annual shareholders meeting. Brian will be there. He will try to seize control of the board. He thinks you're a nobody. Prove him wrong. Everything you need is in this room. Your friend Edwin." Ryan looked around. The lattice of power. The story of love, loss, and revenge. A complete dossier on the Hartwell Empire and its enemies. Edwin hadn't left just the diner and the fortune. He had left Ryan an arsenal. The battle with Brian Hartwell was coming. And Edwin had just armed the most unlikely soldier for the fight of his life. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change for Ryan. By day, he learned to run Riverside Coffee Company. With the help of the financial advisor Edwin had arranged, he began to understand profit margins, supply chains, and payroll. The $6 million portfolio wasn't just a staggering figure. It was a finely tuned trust, generating steady income to keep the coffee house running, pay the staff, and let him live without fear for the first time in years. The first thing he did was raise everyone's wages, starting with Tony and Rachel. Rachel, once his sharpest skeptic, still eyed him warily, as if waiting for the mask to slip. The turning point came one sweltering afternoon when the ancient kitchen air conditioner groaned once and died. The temperature soared like a furnace. "That's it. I quit." Rachel threw down her apron. "I'm not working in a sauna." Once Ryan would have begged her to stay. Now he only nodded. "You're right," he said calmly. "This is unacceptable." He picked up the phone. 2 hours later, a crew of technicians arrived, installing a brand new commercial cooling system. Ryan paid for the emergency job without hesitation. The next day, the coffee house was cool and comfortable. Rachel returned to work, wordless. But when she called him boss for the first time, the word no longer carried sarcasm. Ryan had earned real respect, not by speeches, but by action. But at night he lived in another world, in Edwin's study. Alongside the reluctant yet relentless Bennett, Ryan became a student of power. He carefully dismantled the complex web on the wall, learning about shell companies, leveraged acquisitions, and proxy battles. He read Edwin's private journals, where the old man poured out thoughts on business, humanity, and the wound that never healed. Margaret. Through those pages, Ryan understood Brian better. A reckless heir burning through his grandfather's fortune on empty ventures. Feeding on resentment, then Ryan discovered Edwin's final move. In his later years, Edwin had carved the Hartwell Empire into smaller parts. Leaner but more vulnerable, and funneled most of his personal wealth into anonymous charities. The result? Brian was starved of resources. Unable to buy control outright, Edwin had left his grandson not an empire, but a battlefield. Still, Brian had one advantage: a few board members loyal to his father who saw him as the rightful heir. Piecing together Edwin's notes, Ryan saw the plan. At the upcoming shareholders meeting, Brian would call for a no-confidence vote against the current CEO, a loyalist to Edwin, then leverage the Hartwell name and allies to seize the chairman's seat. "He can't win outright," Bennett said one night, pointing at the shareholder chart, "but he can create chaos, panic the investors, tank the stock, then force a buyout by another conglomerate where he'll be installed as a puppet. His ego would rather burn the empire than be ignored." Ryan stared at the single share certificate on the desk. "So how do we stop him?" Bennett's reply was quiet, steady. "With the only weapon Edwin gave you, the truth. That share gives you the legal right to enter that room and speak. You can't win with votes, but you can win with hearts and reason. The sleepless nights followed one after another. Ryan and Bennett plotted a daring, improbable plan, built on Ryan's ability to convince a room full of sharks that a man who once served coffee understood what was right better than the heir to a dynasty. The day of the meeting arrived. Ryan stood before the mirror in Edwin's penthouse bedroom. No more faded shirt. Bennett had insisted on hiring a stylist. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit. Hair slicked neatly back, he looked composed, confident, though inside his heart thrashed like a trapped bird. "You're ready," Bennett said from the doorway, a rare faint smile crossing his face. Edwin would be proud. 2 security guards escorted Ryan to the lobby. As he stepped into Hartwell Tower, the chandeliers blazing overhead, he saw him, Ryan surrounded by all eyes, laughing loudly, arrogance pouring off him. When he spotted Ryan, his grin faltered, then curved into a mocking smile. "Well, look who showed up," Ryan said loudly for everyone to hear. "Here to serve coffee, buddy." Laughter rippled through the group. Ryan didn't answer. He met Brian's gaze, calm and steady. "I'm a shareholder, Brian," he said, his voice clear and firm, "and I have every right to be here." He walked straight past him, head held high. And in that moment, the man once dismissed as the corner table waiter stepped into the lion's den. The battle had begun. The boardroom felt like a theater of corporate power. A massive U-shaped table filled the center, surrounded by men and women in immaculate suits, faces carved from years of wealth and authority. Behind them, tiered rows overflowed with shareholders, analysts, and members of the press, led by Mr. Bennett. Ryan took a seat in the front row reserved for shareholders. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes, curious, skeptical, even mocking. The meeting began with dry financial reports. Charts, numbers, graphs sliding by like rain against glass. Ryan listened, hands clasped tightly in his lap. His heart beat quick, but his gaze steady. Then the chairperson spoke. "We'll now move to new business." Instantly, Brian rose. He was born to perform. Charismatic, confident, voice booming. "Hartwell Enterprises," he began, "is the legacy of my family. My grandfather was a legend, but his time has passed. It's time for a new Hartwell, young, bold, ready to lead this company into the 21st century. He spoke passionately, painting grand visions, tearing down the current leadership as stagnant and uninspired. Then came his final crescendo. "I formally call for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO. And I nominate myself, Brian Hartwell, as the new chairman of the board." A murmur rippled through the room. Several board members nodded. Clearly supportive, Brian was in control. The current CEO, David Collins, competent but lacking showmanship, stood to defend himself. But his mild words were shredded by Brian's sharp, rehearsed retorts. "Anyone else wish to speak before we proceed to a vote?" The chairperson asked, scanning the room. Bennett looked at Ryan. A subtle nod. Ryan stood. A wave of whispers swept through the chamber. "Who is that? What's he doing here?" Brian arched a brow, smirking. "I thought this part was for shareholders, not the help." Ryan faced the board, his voice carrying through the microphone. Shaky at first, but gaining strength with each word. "I am a shareholder, sir. My name is Ryan Mitchell." He didn't look at Brian. He looked into the eyes of every person in the room. Mr. Hartwell spoke about legacy. "I'm here today because I too am part of Edwin Hartwell's legacy. Not the legacy of billions and takeovers, but the legacy of his final years." Then he told the story of Riverside Coffee Company, of the quiet old man in the corner booth, and of the toast he always cut into squares because he noticed the old man's hands trembled. At first the room was silent, skeptical, but as he spoke something shifted. The same executives who had glanced at him dismissively now listened. "You know," Ryan said, In his last years, Edwin Hartwell no longer cared about buying more companies. He cared about people. He spent his mornings in a small coffee house watching them. He wasn't looking for the best CEO. He was looking for the truest heart. He paused, then turned his gaze toward Brian. Brian Hartwell says he has a bold vision, but according to the documents Edwin Hartwell left, records now in the possession of attorney Charles Bennett. What did that vision bring? Bennett stepped forward, placing a thick binder on the chairman's desk. Copies for the entire board, he said coolly. Ryan's voice grew stronger. A vision that led to a loss of $4.2 million on a failed tech project. A vision that forced his grandfather to cover $890,000 in gambling debt. And finally, a vision so reckless that Edwin Hartwell himself wrote in his own hand, "My grandson has the ambition of a king but the judgment of a fool. I cannot leave my empire to Brian, not out of malice, but out of duty to protect it from his own hands." Gasps swept the room. Brian's face flushed red. Trembling with rage. Lies. All lies. No. Ryan said calmly, eyes steady. It's all documented. Edwin Hartwell believed the heart of this company was not in its stock price, but in its dignity and conscience, something his grandson never understood. He took a breath, his voice clear, resonant. "I'm not here to seize power. I'm here to honor Edwin Hartwell's final vision." He turned to the board. He didn't want a new king. He wanted a guardian. He trusted David Collins, the man he once called the backbone of this company. But he also knew this company needed a soul. Ryan's tone softened, warm and resolute. "So as a shareholder, I propose an amendment to the company charter that 10% of annual profits be allocated to establish the Hartwell Legacy Fund to support small businesses and education scholarships in line with Mr. Edwin's wish." He paused, then smiled faintly. "And I nominate myself, Ryan Mitchell, owner of Riverside Coffee Company, the heir Edwin Hartwell chose, to oversee that fund." Silence fell, thick and electric. Then from the far end of the table, an elderly man, the board's longest-serving member, Edwin's friend of 50 years, lifted his hands and began to clap, once, twice, 3 times. The sound spread, slowly at first, then rising in waves, soon the entire room. Investors, shareholders, even some who had backed Brian, were on their feet, applauding. No one said another word. Brian stood frozen, his expression shattering, defeated, not by a businessman, but by a waiter with a story that was true. The vote that followed was a formality. Brian's motion was rejected overwhelmingly. Ryan's proposal passed unanimously. And in that moment, amid thunderous applause, Ryan Mitchell understood. The lonely old man had chosen right. 6 months later, Riverside Coffee Company had been transformed. It was brighter now, tidier, and the kitchen looked like a true artist's studio. But the old butter-yellow vinyl chair at the familiar corner table remained, now sealed under a thin layer of clear protective plastic. Above it, a small bronze plaque had been carefully mounted on the wall. Edwin's Corner, where everyone is seen. Ryan now divided his time between running the coffee house with Tony as a well-paid manager, and Rachel as an improbably loyal shift leader, and overseeing the Hartwell Legacy Fund, which was quietly changing lives. For the first time in years, he had time to paint again. His canvases were now vibrant with color, reflecting the balance he had found between past and present, between art and work, between kindness and power. One Saturday morning, Marcus, now 7, sat at the corner table doing homework. Ryan passed by carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "Dad," Marcus looked up from his sketchbook. "Do you think Mr. Edwin would like it here now?" Ryan sat beside him, gazing at the window where Edwin once sat every morning. "Yes, son," he said softly. "I think he'd love it." Marcus bent back over his drawing while Ryan opened the worn leather folder Edwin had left him. Inside was an antique ivory chess set, and a handwritten note. Teach Marcus to play chess with this set. It's the one I used to play with my son. Now it belongs to Marcus. And through him, I hope our true legacy will live on. Not in wealth, but in kindness, Edwin. Ryan placed the chessboard on the table. Marcus. How about I teach you how to play chess? Marcus's eyes lit up. But Mr. Edwin was supposed to teach me. Ryan smiled. I know, but now he wants me to teach you. And one day, you'll teach your own child. They began arranging the pieces. The faint clicks of wooden chessmen echoed like time looping back on itself. The bell over the door jingled. An elderly man, thin, silver-haired, walking alone, stepped inside. He paused, looking around uncertainly, something lost and sad in his eyes. Ryan stood, greeting him with a warm smile. Good morning, sir. A table for one. The old man nodded faintly. Ryan led him to the corner table, Edwin's table. This is the best seat in the house. Ryan said, How do you take your coffee, black? The old man murmured. Ryan nodded and turned toward the counter. As he did, he caught Marcus watching. Dad, Marcus whispered. He looked sad. Ryan bent down, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. Yes, he does, buddy. And that's why we have to be kind to him. Sometimes all a person needs is someone willing to see them. Marcus nodded solemnly, like Mr. Edwin saw you. Ryan smiled, voice barely above a whisper. That's right, son. Just like Mr. Edwin saw me. He stood, poured the coffee, and brought it to the table. Here's your coffee, sir. I'll have your breakfast right out. As Ryan turned back toward the kitchen, sunlight streamed through the window. Glinting off the bronze plaque, he paused, quietly speaking into the morning air. A message of gratitude carried on the light. Thank you, Edwin. You didn't just save me. You taught me what legacy truly means. It's not what we leave to people, but what we leave in them. Ryan's story reminds us that the greatest investments in life are not in stocks or bonds, but in people, a small act of kindness. A moment of dignity given to someone who feels invisible can ripple further than we imagine. Edwin Hartwell once had everything: wealth, power, fame. But he left this world yearning for something money could never buy: genuine connection. And he found it in a humble coffee house through the hands of a man who chose kindness over bitterness. Ryan didn't just inherit a fortune. He inherited a responsibility to prove that true wealth isn't about what we have, but how we use it. His story asks us a question: who are the silent Edwins in your life? And do you have the grace to recognize them? If this story of unexpected kindness and the power of empathy touched you, take a moment to share it so others can hear it too. And don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt true stories each week. Because sometimes one small act of kindness can change an entire life. Not only for the one who receives it, but for the one who gives it.